They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for the woman they left for dead, it was a 5-course meal served in the very boardroom they stole from her. She was the pregnant wife cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back, while her husband and his mistress flaunted their new life paid for with her tears. They thought she had vanished, a forgotten tragedy. They were wrong. 5 years later, a mysterious millionaire bought their failing company. And when she walked in to take her seat at the head of the table, their world didn't just crumble, it imploded. The rain in downtown Seattle had a certain rhythm, a relentless drumming that usually soothed Bianca. Tonight, it felt like a taunt. Each drop that slid down the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment seemed to mock the fragile perfection of her life. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the vanilla and sandalwood of an expensive candle. On the polished mahogany dining table, a single plate of untouched salmon and asparagus grew cold. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. Liam was late. Again. Bianca traced the rim of her water glass, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was from their wedding day. Liam, with his effortlessly charming smile and eyes the color of the Pacific on a clear day, was looking at her as if she were the only woman in the universe. She, in turn, was beaming her heart so full she thought it might burst. They were the golden couple, the envy of their circle. Liam, the brilliant co-founder of Innovatech Solutions, a rising star in the city's tech scene. And Bianca, his loving wife, the silent partner who had poured her entire inheritance into his dream, believing in him more than she believed in herself. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. It was a text from Liam. "So sorry, Angel. Stuck in a crisis meeting. Can't be helped. We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise. Happy anniversary. I love you." A familiar pang of disappointment, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through her. It had become a pattern. The late nights, the cancelled dates, the vague excuses that always revolved around work. She tried to swallow her unease. He was building an empire for them, he always said, for their future. And there was a new secret reason to believe in that future. A reason she had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. Her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. It was still flat, showing no sign of the tiny, precious life growing within her. 2 months. After years of trying, of quiet heartbreak and dashed hopes, she was finally pregnant. The thought was a secret sunbeam, a private joy she held close. Tonight was supposed to have been the night. She'd planned it all, a candle-lit dinner, his favorite wine, which she would pretend to sip, and then she would give him a small gift box containing a single, tiny baby shoe. Pushing her chair back, she decided to surprise him at the office. A wave of guilt washed over her. Liam hated being disturbed at work, but it was their anniversary. Surely even a crisis couldn't stand in the way of that. She'd just drop off the dinner she'd so lovingly prepared. A small romantic gesture. The Innovatech Solutions headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper. The security guard, a kindly man named George, greeted her with a warm smile. "Evening, Mrs. Hayes. Working late to keep the boss company." Something like that. "George?" She smiled back, her spirits lifting slightly. The elevator ride was silent, ascending through the building like a breath being held. The 48th floor, the executive suite, was eerily quiet. The bustling energy of the day had been replaced by a hushed stillness. Liam's office door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Bianca's heart quickened with anticipation. She pushed the door open gently. "Liam, honey, I brought you." The words died in her throat. The scene before her was one of such profound betrayal that her mind struggled to process it. The crisis meeting was not in the boardroom. It was here. Liam was there, his back to the door, his expensive suit jacket carelessly thrown over a chair. And with him was Sarah Jenkins, his personal assistant. Sarah was a woman Bianca knew well, young, ambitious, with a razor-sharp intellect and a wardrobe to match. Bianca had always been kind to her, seeing a younger version of herself in Sarah's drive. But the woman in Liam's office now was a stranger. Her professional blouse was unbuttoned, her skirt hiked high on her thighs. She was perched on the edge of Liam's sprawling executive desk, her legs wrapped around his waist. His hands were tangled in her sleek blonde hair, their mouths locked in a kiss so passionate, so raw, it was a violation. Bianca made a small, strangled sound, a noise of pure animal pain. They sprang apart. Liam spun around his face, a mask of horror and disbelief. Sarah, however, looked almost triumphant. A slow, cruel smirk played on her lips as she leisurely straightened her clothes, her eyes cold and calculating meeting Bianca's. "Bianca, what are you doing here?" Liam stammered, his voice hoarse. He took a step towards her, his hands outstretched as if to ward off the reality of the situation. But Bianca couldn't hear him. A roaring sound filled her ears, the sound of her world shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The carefully constructed facade of her life, the love, the trust, the shared dreams, it was all a lie, a sick, elaborate joke. 5 years, she whispered the words barely audible. We've been married for 5 years. Bianca, listen to me. It's not what it looks like. He pleaded the classic, pathetic refrain of the guilty. It was Sarah who answered, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," she said, sliding off the desk and walking towards Liam, possessively linking her arm through his. "Isn't it time you told her, Liam, about us?" Bianca's eyes flickered from her husband's ashen face to the smug woman beside him. "Us." Liam wouldn't meet her gaze. He stared at a point on the floor, his jaw tight. "Sarah and I, we're in love." The word struck Bianca with the force of a physical blow. Love. He used that word to describe this cheap, sordid affair, while texting the same hollow sentiment to his wife. "Liam has been wanting to tell you for months." Sarah continued, her tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "He just didn't know how. He didn't want to hurt you." She paused, then added with a saccharine smile, "But I guess this works, too. Rips the bandage right off, doesn't it?" The room began to spin. Bianca clutched the doorframe for support, her body trembling. The baby. Her mind screamed the word. Her secret, her tiny beacon of hope, now felt like a lead weight in her womb. How could she bring a child into this wasteland of deceit? "I want you out of my house." Bianca finally managed, her voice shaking with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "Both of you, out." Liam finally looked at her, but his eyes were cold, devoid of the love she once cherished. The shock had worn off, replaced by a chilling resolve. "Actually, Bianca," he said, his tone flat and businesslike, "it's not your house. What are you talking about? My name is on the deed." "Was," Sarah corrected her, her smile widening. "You signed some papers last month, remember? Liam said they were for refinancing, a formality." Bianca's blood ran cold. She remembered. Liam had rushed in one morning, a stack of documents in hand, saying their accountant needed her signature urgently. He'd pointed she'd signed. She had trusted him implicitly. "Those papers," Liam explained, his voice devoid of any emotion, "transferred all your assets into a new holding company. My holding company. The penthouse, the cars, even your shares in Innovatech. The shares you bought with your inheritance." The air left Bianca's lungs. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had systematically erased her. He had stripped her of everything: her home, her security, her future. He had planned this for months. Every loving word, every shared smile, every promise for the future had been a calculated lie. "You're penniless, Bianca," Sarah said, savoring each word. "And you're trespassing. I think it's time for you to go." Liam stood by, silent and complicit, as Sarah picked up the phone on his desk. "Security. Yes, we have an unauthorized individual on the 48th floor. A woman. She appears to be unstable. Please escort her from the building." Tears streamed down Bianca's face, hot and furious. She looked at Liam, searching for any flicker of the man she had loved, any hint of remorse. She found nothing, only the cold, hard eyes of a stranger. George, the kindly security guard, arrived a few minutes later, his face etched with confusion and pity. "Mrs. Hayes, is everything all right?" Bianca couldn't speak. She was numb, hollowed out. She allowed him to gently guide her towards the elevator, her body moving on autopilot. As the doors slid shut, she caught one last glimpse of her life, Liam and Sarah, standing together in the warm glow of the office, two predators celebrating their kill. She stumbled out of the skyscraper and into the relentless Seattle rain. She had no money, no phone, no keys. The clothes on her back were all she had left. The anniversary dinner she'd prepared was still in her car, a car that was no longer hers. She was alone, homeless, betrayed in the most brutal way imaginable. And she was pregnant with the child of the man who had just destroyed her. As the cold rain soaked her to the bone, a new terrifying reality set in. She had lost everything. The life she knew was over. And in the vast, indifferent city, not a single soul knew of the secret she carried, or the storm that had just consumed her world. The fight for survival had just begun. The first few weeks were a blur of primal survival. Bianca, the woman who once debated between charity galas, was now a ghost haunting the city's underbelly. She slept in bus shelters, the hard plastic benches a cruel mockery of her once plush king-sized bed. She ate from soup kitchens, the humility of it a constant burning shame. The faces around her were gaunt, etched with the harsh lines of poverty and despair, and she saw her own reflection in their hopeless eyes. Each day was a battle against hunger, cold, and the crushing weight of her new reality. The city she had once loved now felt like a labyrinth of painful memories. Every corner held a ghost of a life that was no longer hers. The cafe where Liam had proposed, the park where they used to walk their dog, the theater where they'd had their first date. She avoided these places like the plague, her grief too raw, too profound. But a more immediate, more terrifying grief was taking root. The stress, the malnutrition, the nights spent shivering in the damp Seattle air. It was all taking its toll. One grey morning, huddled in the relative privacy of a library bathroom, a sharp, cramping pain tore through her abdomen. It was followed by a wave of nausea, and then a horrifying rush of blood. There, in the sterile silence of a public restroom, she lost the baby. Her secret sunbeam, the last tiny piece of her old life, was extinguished. The physical pain was immense, but the emotional agony was a black hole that threatened to swallow her whole. She had lost her husband, her home, her fortune, and now her child. It was the ultimate, cruelest blow. For days, she was a hollow shell, a spectre of a woman wandering the streets with no purpose, no future. The thought of ending it all was a seductive whisper in the back of her mind. What was left to live for? It was in her darkest hour, sitting on a park bench as the sun set, that something shifted. She watched a young family playing nearby, their laughter echoing in the twilight. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, the little girl squealing with delight. The sight didn't trigger the sharp pang of loss she expected. Instead, a different feeling began to smolder in the ashes of her despair rage. A cold, clear, all-consuming rage. They had taken everything from her. Liam and Sarah. They were living in her home, spending her money, thriving on the ruins of her life. They believed she was broken, destroyed, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. And in that moment, she made a vow. She would not be their victim. She would not be a tragic footnote in their story. She would survive. She would fight. And one day, she would have her revenge. That night, Bianca Hayes died. And from her ashes, a new woman began to rise. She started by selling the last remnant of her old life, her diamond wedding ring. She'd kept it hidden, a painful reminder of broken vows. She found a pawn shop in a seedy part of town and haggled for every last dollar, her voice steely, her eyes hard. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a room in a cheap boarding house and a few weeks of food. Her first job was washing dishes in a greasy diner, her hands raw and chapped from the hot water and harsh soap. The work was grueling, the pay abysmal. But it was honest. And it was hers. She worked double shifts, saving every penny, her anger fueling her like a furnace. She was no longer the soft, trusting woman who signed papers without reading them. She was sharp, focused, and relentless. With her small savings, she enrolled in night classes at a community college, studying business and finance. The subjects that had once bored her now fascinated her. She devoured textbooks, her mind a sponge, soaking up knowledge about corporate structures, hostile takeovers, and financial forensics. She was arming herself, forging the weapons she would one day use to reclaim what was hers. After earning her associate's degree with top honors, she got a low-level administrative job at a small, struggling tech firm. It was a world away from the glamour of Innovatech, but it was a start. Here she wasn't Mrs. Hayes, the socialite wife. She was just Bianca, the quiet, fiercely intelligent woman who worked harder than anyone else. Her ascent was meteoric. She didn't play office politics. She produced results. She saw inefficiencies no one else noticed, streamlined processes, and identified new market opportunities. Her bosses, impressed by her raw talent and ferocious work ethic, promoted her again and again. Within 2 years, she was a senior project manager. It was then that she was headhunted by Quantum Leap Dynamics, a major player in the tech industry and Innovatech's biggest rival. They offered her a position that came with a 6-figure salary and significant responsibility. It was her first taste of real power. At Quantum Leap, Bianca blossomed. She shed the last vestiges of her old self, cultivating a new persona. She was formidable, enigmatic, and utterly brilliant. She kept her personal life a fiercely guarded secret. No one knew where she came from, what drove her. They only knew her results. She spearheaded projects that brought the company hundreds of millions in revenue, earning a reputation as a strategic genius. a woman who could see 10 moves ahead on the corporate chessboard. 5 years. 5 years to the day since she had stumbled out into the rain, broken and destitute. Bianca now stood in her own penthouse apartment, one even more luxurious than the one she had lost. The view of the Seattle skyline was breathtaking. She was no longer the wife of a tech mogul. She was the mogul. She was the executive vice president of strategy at Quantum Leap Dynamics, one of the most powerful women in the industry. Her phone rang. It was her CEO, a man named David Chen. "Bianca," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The board has approved your proposal. It's a go. Project Nightingale is officially a go." A slow, cold smile touched Bianca's lips. Excellent. She hung up and walked over to her desk, picking up a thick file. The cover read, "Project Nightingale Hostile Takeover Proposal. Target Company Innovatech Solutions." For the past year, Innovatech had been failing. Under Liam and Sarah's reckless and extravagant leadership, the company had squandered its initial success. They had made a series of disastrous business decisions driven by arrogance and greed. Their stock was plummeting, their investors were losing faith. They were vulnerable, ripe for the picking. Bianca had been watching, waiting patiently, gathering her forces. She had orchestrated this moment with the precision of a master tactician. She knew every weakness, every vulnerability, every skeleton in their closet. She had vanished from their lives 5 years ago, a ghost they had long since forgotten. But the ghost was about to return. And this time, she was the one in control. The ascent was complete. The collision was now inevitable. The news of the hostile takeover hit Innovatech Solutions like a tsunami. Panic rippled through the hallways. The company, once a beacon of innovation, was now a sinking ship, its captain and his first mate too busy plundering the cabins to notice the gaping hole in the hull. Liam Hayes, his charm worn thin by years of complacent leadership, scrambled to rally his board. But it was too late. Quantum Leap Dynamics' offer was too aggressive, their strategy too flawless. The shareholders, desperate to salvage their investments, jumped ship in droves. The takeover was swift and brutal. Within a week, it was a done deal. Innovatech Solutions, Liam's pride and joy, the company built on Bianca's stolen inheritance, now belonged to their biggest rival. An emergency all-hands board meeting was called, the purpose to meet the new leadership. The atmosphere in the 48th floor boardroom, the same room where Bianca's life had been shattered, was thick with tension and resentment. Liam sat at the head of the table, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Sarah sat beside him, her usual smugness replaced by a poorly concealed anxiety. Her expensive dress suddenly seemed too tight, her jewelry too gaudy. The other board members, a collection of grim-faced men and women, muttered amongst themselves their loyalty to Liam, evaporating with their stock options. "I don't understand how this happened," one of them grumbled. "Their strategy was airtight. It's like they knew every move we were going to make before we made it." "Who is behind this?" another asked. "Who is this mysterious EVP from Quantum Leap who orchestrated the whole damn thing?" Liam had no answers. He felt neutered, powerless. The company he had stolen was now being stolen from him, and he was utterly helpless to stop it. The boardroom doors swung open. David Chen, the CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics, walked in, exuding an aura of calm authority. He was flanked by 2 associates. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice polite but firm. "I know this is a difficult transition, but I assure you we believe in the potential of this company. That's why we've put our best and brightest in charge of this merger." He stepped aside. "Allow me to introduce you to the new CEO of Innovatech Solutions." Time seemed to slow down. Through the open doors, a figure emerged. A woman. She was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy blue power suit that screamed quiet confidence. Her dark hair was styled in a chic, severe bob. Her face was elegant, her expression unreadable, her eyes shielded by an icy calm. It was Bianca. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Board members who had known her as the quiet, unassuming Mrs. Hayes stared their mouths agape. But their shock was nothing compared to the cataclysmic explosion that went off in the minds of Liam and Sarah. Liam shot to his feet, a strangled noise escaping his lips. His face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost, and in a way he had. Sarah's reaction was even more visceral. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in sheer, unadulterated terror. The blood-red lipstick she wore stood out in stark contrast to her suddenly pale face. This was impossible. A nightmare. Bianca was supposed to be gone. A forgotten tragedy. Not this. This titan of industry standing before them. Bianca's gaze swept across the room, cool and appraising. She didn't acknowledge the shockwaves her presence had caused. She walked to the head of the table, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor, the sound echoing the ticking of a bomb. She placed her leather portfolio down on the exact spot where Sarah had so brazenly sat 5 years ago. Her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of glass, finally landed on Liam. She held his gaze for a long, torturous moment, letting him drown in the abyss of his own shock and guilt. Then she shifted her attention to Sarah, a flicker of something unidentifiable. Contempt, pity in their depths. "Good morning," Bianca said, her voice a low, melodic purr that sent a shiver down Liam's spine. It was her voice, but it was different. Deeper. Harder. Stripped of the warmth and affection he remembered. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bianca, and as of this morning I am your new Chief Executive Officer." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. "There will be many changes in the coming weeks," she continued, her tone crisp and businesslike. "We will be conducting a complete operational and financial audit. We will be restructuring. We will be rebuilding this company from the ground up, based on principles of integrity and innovation principles that have been sorely lacking." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart hitting Liam and Sarah with pinpoint accuracy. Liam finally found his voice, though it was a weak, trembling imitation of his usual confident baritone. "Bianca, I don't understand. How—" Bianca turned her full attention to him, a faint, humorless smile touching her lips. "How I worked. I learned. I persevered. While you were playing house with my money, I was building an empire. This empire." She gestured around the room, a room that was now unequivocally hers. Sarah, recovering from her initial shock, found a sliver of her old audacity. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "This company is Liam's." Bianca's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "This company was built on a foundation of lies and theft," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "It was built on my inheritance. It was built on my trust. You and Liam were merely its corrupt caretakers. Your tenure is over." She turned to the rest of the stunned board members. "Mr. Hayes will be staying on," she announced, the statement dropping like a guillotine. "As Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration, he will report directly to me." It was a masterstroke of cruelty. She wasn't just firing him. She was demoting him, humiliating him, forcing him to witness her triumph from a position of utter subservience. He was no longer the king of his castle. He was a court jester in hers. As for Miss Jenkins, Bianca continued, her gaze falling on Sarah with chilling indifference. Your position as personal assistant is of course redundant. My own assistant will be starting tomorrow. Human Resources will have your severance package ready this afternoon. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk. The finality in her voice was absolute. Sarah stared at her, her face a maelstrom of hatred and disbelief. She opened her mouth to protest, to scream, to unleash the torrent of venom building inside her, but no words came out. She had been dismissed, erased. Just as she and Liam had erased Bianca 5 years ago. Bianca clapped her hands together, a sharp, decisive sound that broke the spell. Well then, let's get to work, shall we? The collision had happened. The game had been reset. And Bianca, the woman they had left with nothing, now had everything. She was their boss, their judge, and their jury. The trial was about to begin. The first week under Bianca's reign was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She moved into the CEO's office, her office, and had it completely redecorated. The ostentatious mahogany desk Liam had favored was replaced with a sleek, minimalist structure of glass and chrome. The gaudy abstract paintings Sarah had chosen were taken down the walls, now bare, save for a single-framed stock certificate, Quantum Leap Dynamics. It was a constant, silent reminder of who was in charge. Liam was a man adrift in a sea of his own making. He was relegated to a small, sterile office on a lower floor, a space that felt more like a prison cell than a workspace. The title Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration was a meaningless, humiliating invention. His tasks consisted of compiling old data reports and documenting past project leads, forcing him to relive the history of the company he had both built and destroyed. He was a ghost in his own machine, forced to watch as Bianca with surgical precision dismantled his legacy and built her own. His feelings were a toxic, confusing cocktail. There was the deep, gnawing regret, the ghost of the gentle, loving wife he had so cruelly discarded. He saw her in flashes the way Bianca's brow would furrow in concentration, a mannerism he dimly remembered. But that woman was gone. In her place was this formidable, untouchable powerhouse, and to his shame, he felt a new, twisted flicker of desire. The power, the confidence, the sheer, unadulterated strength she radiated was intoxicating. He had crushed the delicate flower, only to find it had regrown as a Venus flytrap, beautiful and deadly. Sarah, on the other hand, was consumed by a singular burning emotion, hatred. Being fired was a humiliation. Being dismissed so contemptuously by Bianca was an existential threat. Her life with Liam was built on the spoils of their victory over Bianca. Now the vanquished had returned as the conqueror, and Sarah's entire world was built on shifting sand. She didn't clear out her desk and leave quietly. She festered. Her severance package was generous, a final ironic twist of Bianca's knife, and she used that money not to move on, but to plot. She spent her days in expensive coffee shops, her phone glued to her ear, calling old contacts from Innovatech, fishing for gossip, for any scrap of information she could use against Bianca. "She's a monster," Sarah would hiss into the phone to a former colleague. "Cold, calculating. You have to be careful. There's something not right about her. Where did she even come from 5 years? and she just appears out of nowhere with all this power. It's suspicious." Her whispers began to spread like a virus through the company's servers. Rumors circulated in hushed tones by the water cooler and in private chat messages. She must have a rich benefactor. Maybe she blackmailed her way to the top. No one gets that successful that fast on their own. Sarah was planting seeds of doubt, trying to poison the well of Bianca's authority. She was convinced there had to be a secret, a weakness, a dirty little scandal she could expose to bring the whole edifice crashing down. Bianca was not oblivious to the whispers. She had anticipated them. But she didn't react. She remained focused, impassive, her gaze fixed on her objective, the complete overhaul of Innovatech. She worked tirelessly, her days a blur of meetings, financial analyses, and strategic planning sessions. In this hostile new environment, however, she found an unexpected ally. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was in his late 50s, the chief financial officer, and one of the few board members who had been with Innovatech from its inception. He was a man of quiet integrity, who had been increasingly disgusted by Liam and Sarah's reckless management. He had watched them drive the company he loved into the ground, and had felt powerless to stop it. Marcus saw through Sarah's smear campaign immediately. More importantly, he saw the brilliance in Bianca. He was mesmerized by her sharp intellect, her deep understanding of the market, and her unwavering vision. One evening, he found her working late, the city lights twinkling behind her in the vast expanse of her office window. "You should go home, you know," he said gently, standing in the doorway. "The company won't collapse if you take a few hours off." Bianca looked up from a spreadsheet, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "There's a lot to be done, Marcus. You're doing a remarkable job," he said, walking into the room. "What you've accomplished in a matter of weeks is extraordinary." He paused, then decided to take a risk. "I was there, you know, at the beginning. I knew you and Liam when you first started this. I remember your passion, your belief." Bianca's mask of composure slipped for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of old pain crossed her features before she quickly suppressed it. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly. "I also know what they did to you was wrong." Marcus continued, his voice low and sincere. "I never approved of Sarah, or the way Liam changed. The rumors they're spreading now, it's despicable." Bianca looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a genuine kindness in his eyes, a loyalty not to the old regime or the new, but to the company itself, to what was right. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, the words carrying a weight that went far beyond simple politeness. "It means a lot to hear you say that." "I want you to know you have my full support," he said. "Whatever you need. This company deserves a second chance, and you are the one to give it that." It was a small moment, but a significant one. Bianca had spent 5 years building walls around herself, trusting no one. Marcus's simple act of decency was the first crack in that fortress. She now had an ally, someone on the inside who saw her not just as a ruthless corporate raider, but as a true leader. Meanwhile, Sarah's desperation grew. Her whispers weren't having the desired effect. Bianca's position seemed unassailable. So she escalated her scheme. She hired a private investigator, a shady character named Rick, to dig into Bianca's past. "I want everything," Sarah told him, her voice hard as nails, as they met in a dimly lit bar. For 5 years, this woman was off the grid. Find out where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. There has to be something, A messy divorce, a lawsuit, a criminal record. Something I can use to destroy her. Rick, a man who reveled in the dirt of other people's lives, smiled. Don't you worry, Miss Jenkins. Everyone has secrets. It's just a matter of finding them. The scheme was in motion. As Bianca worked to rebuild a company, Sarah worked to tear down its leader. And Liam, trapped between the woman he had wronged and the woman who had helped him do it, was a ticking time bomb. His guilt and resentment, a volatile combination waiting for a spark. The whispers were about to become a storm. The internal audit initiated by Bianca and spearheaded by Marcus Thorne began to yield its toxic fruit. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The deeper Marcus and his team of forensic accountants dug into Innovatech's finances from the past 5 years, the more a disturbing picture of gross negligence and systematic fraud emerged. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, within padded expense reports, dummy corporations, and inflated invoices. Lavish business trips for Liam and Sarah to Bali and the French Riviera. Company funds used for down payments on luxury cars and designer wardrobes. Consulting fees paid to a shell company whose sole director was Sarah's cousin. It was a cesspool of greed and corruption, a testament to their arrogance. They had treated the company's coffers as their personal piggy bank, so certain they would never be held accountable. Marcus would bring the findings to Bianca's office each evening, his face a mixture of grim satisfaction and professional outrage. "It's worse than we thought," he said one night, laying out a file thick with incriminating documents on her glass desk. "They didn't just mismanage the company. They actively embezzled from it. We're talking millions, Bianca. Millions of dollars." Bianca examined the evidence, her expression a mask of cold fury. Each document was a fresh stab of betrayal, a new confirmation of the depth of their depravity. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was a criminal conspiracy. They hadn't just thrown her out. They had robbed her, the shareholders, and the employees blind. As the evidence mounted, the pressure on Liam began to crack his carefully constructed composure. He saw Marcus's team hauling boxes of financial records from the archives. He saw stern-faced accountants interviewing his former subordinates. The walls were closing in, and the stench of his own guilt was becoming unbearable. He was a passenger on a train he couldn't stop heading straight for a cliff. His relationship with Sarah, already strained by Bianca's return, fractured completely. Their panicked phone calls devolved into bitter, accusatory shouting matches. "This is your fault," Liam would yell into his phone, hiding in a stairwell. "You're spending your ridiculous demands. You were too greedy." "My fault," Sarah would shriek back. "You were the one signing the checks, you coward. You were so desperate to keep me happy, you would have signed anything." They were like two rats trapped in a cage, turning on each other as the water level rose. The love they had once professed was exposed for what it was, a transactional alliance of convenience and mutual greed. While the financial noose tightened, Sarah's private investigator was hitting a wall. Rick the PI was good at his job, but Bianca had covered her tracks with meticulous care. For 5 years, she had lived a quiet, almost monastic life. She had no debts, no lawsuits, no social media presence. Her life was a closed book. "I'm telling you, Miss Jenkins, there's nothing here," Rick reported back to a frantic Sarah. "The woman lived like a nun, worked, studied, slept. That's it. She paid her rent on time, her taxes were immaculate. There's no dirt to dig." "That's impossible," Sarah screeched, pacing her living room, a room paid for with stolen money. "Look harder. Check hospital records, police reports. Something must have happened." Her desperation led Rick to a new, darker path. Hospital records. He used a series of illegal pretexts and bribes to access sealed medical files from Seattle General Hospital, and there he found it. A record from 5 years ago. An emergency admission for a Jane Doe found collapsed. The diagnosis: severe emotional distress, malnutrition, and a spontaneous abortion. A miscarriage. Rick felt a slimy thrill of victory. This was it. The dirt Sarah wanted. He called her immediately. "I've got something," he said, his voice greasy with triumph. "Something big." He told her everything. A slow, venomous smile spread across Sarah's face. This was better than a lawsuit, better than a criminal record. This was personal. This was pain. This was a weapon she could use to shatter Bianca's icy composure and expose her to the world not as a powerful CEO, but as a damaged, tragic victim. That evening, Bianca was working late with Marcus, finalizing the audit report. The sheer scale of the fraud was staggering. As they sat in the quiet of her office, Marcus could see the toll the past few weeks had taken on her. The armor of the powerful CEO was still in place, but he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the ghost of an old sadness that never quite left her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Bianca looked out at the city lights, her reflection a faint silhouette against the glass. "They didn't just steal money, Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They stole years of my life. They took a woman who believed in love and trust, and they broke her." She paused, taking a shaky breath. She had never spoken of this to anyone. But in the quiet trust she had built with Marcus, the words came tumbling out. "I was pregnant when they threw me out, Marcus. I was carrying Liam's child." Marcus stared at her, his heart clenching with a profound sorrow and a fresh wave of fury towards Liam and Sarah. "Bianca, I had no idea. I lost the baby." She continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. "The stress, everything. I lost him. I was alone." In that moment, she wasn't the formidable CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics. She was just Bianca, a woman sharing a story of unimaginable pain. It was a moment of pure, raw vulnerability, a glimpse into the furnace that had forged her strength. "They tried to erase me," she said, her voice regaining its steel. "They thought I would just disappear. But you can't erase something that's been burned into you. You can only use the fire to reforge yourself." As she spoke those words, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was a single word: "Remember." It was from an anonymous address. Attached was a single file, a scanned document, a hospital record from 5 years ago. Her hospital record, under the name Jane Doe. Below the image was a single line of text. "The world would be very interested to hear the tragic story of the barren CEO. Resign now, or everyone will know your secret." The unraveling was complete. Sarah had found her weapon. The financial audit was about to expose their crimes, but Sarah had just launched her own preemptive strike, aimed directly at Bianca's heart. The final confrontation was no longer just about business. It had become a war with no rules. The blackmail email was a declaration of war. For a moment, seeing the stark black and white of the hospital record on her screen, Bianca felt the icy grip of that old trauma. The shame, the pain, the loneliness of that sterile bathroom floor. It all came rushing back. Sarah's attack was as cruel as it was calculated, designed to cripple her with the weight of her own tragedy. Sarah believed this secret was Bianca's greatest weakness. She was about to find out it had become her greatest strength. Instead of shattering, Bianca felt a surge of cold, righteous fury. They had taken her child from her. Now they were trying to use that loss to silence her. They had crossed the final line. There would be no more quiet maneuvers, no more strategic chess moves. It was time to burn their world to the ground. She looked at Marcus, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. "She's made her move," Bianca said, her voice deceptively calm. "Now I'll make mine." She turned to her computer and began typing. "Call an emergency meeting of the board of directors, full attendance mandatory, and make sure Liam Hayes is there. Tell him his future depends on it." The next morning, the 48th floor boardroom was once again filled with an anxious energy. The board members, already reeling from the rumors of the audit, now sensed a final dramatic reckoning was at hand. Liam stood at the back of the room, looking haggard and drawn. He had no idea what this meeting was about, but he felt a sense of impending doom, a feeling that his life was about to be irrevocably altered. The doors opened, and Bianca strode in. She was not wearing her usual power suit. Today she was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress. There was no pretense, no armor, just a woman ready to face her demons. She didn't take her seat at the head of the table. Instead, she stood before them, a lone figure against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice clear and steady, resonating with an unnerving calm. "For the past several weeks, Mr. Thorne and his team have been conducting a thorough financial audit of this company's activities over the last 5 years. I have the results here." She gestured to a thick binder on the table, which Marcus solemnly opened. "The audit has uncovered a pattern of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy," Bianca announced, her eyes scanning the faces of the board members. "Funds in excess of $7 million have been illegally diverted from this company for personal use." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. These funds were used to finance a lifestyle of obscene luxury by the two individuals this board entrusted with the company's leadership, Liam Hayes and Sarah Jenkins. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck. All eyes in the room turned to him, a sea of accusatory glares. "The evidence is irrefutable," Bianca continued, her voice like a judge's gavel. "We have bank statements, falsified invoices, testimony from coerced employees, and a clear money trail leading from Innovatech's accounts directly to shell corporations controlled by Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Hayes." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "The district attorney's office has been notified. A criminal investigation is already underway." This was it. The public disgrace, the legal ruin. Liam felt the floor give way beneath him. He was finished. But Bianca wasn't done. The financial execution was complete. Now came the personal one. "This is a story of corporate greed," she said, her voice softening slightly, drawing them in. "But it is also a personal story. It's my story. And I believe you all deserve to know the whole truth." She looked directly at Liam, her gaze pinning him in place. 5 years ago, I was not just Liam's wife. I was his partner. The seed money for this company, the money that gave him his start, came from my inheritance. I gave him everything I had, because I believed in him. She began to pace slowly, her voice filled with a raw, captivating emotion. "On the night of our 5th wedding anniversary, I came to this very office to surprise him, and I found him with his assistant, Sarah Jenkins, here on that desk." The board members stared, utterly engrossed. This was no longer a business meeting. It was a confession, a tragedy unfolding before their eyes. "He told me he was in love with her," Bianca said, her voice cracking, for the first time, a sliver of the old pain showing through. And then he informed me that he had tricked me into signing away my home, my assets and my shares in this company. He and Ms. Jenkins threw me out of this building with nothing but the clothes on my back. Liam squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the weight of her testimony, the truth of his own monstrous actions laid bare. They left me homeless, penniless. Bianca's voice grew stronger, fueled by the memory. But they took more than my money. Last night I received a blackmail threat, an attempt to force my resignation. They threatened to expose a secret I have held for 5 years, a secret they clearly see as a source of shame. She stopped pacing and stood perfectly still, her presence commanding the entire room. When Liam Hayes threw me onto the street, she said, her voice ringing with defiance, I was 2 months pregnant with his child. A collective horrified gasp filled the silence. Liam's head snapped up, his eyes wide, with a dawning, sickening understanding. Pregnant. She had been pregnant. The thought, the reality of it, was a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from his lungs. I lost the baby, Bianca stated, her voice devoid of self-pity, filled only with a terrible, steely strength. I lost our child because of the stress and the trauma and the poverty they forced upon me. I lost him alone on the floor of a public bathroom. Tears were now openly streaming down the faces of several board members. The air was thick with a mixture of pity for Bianca and utter revulsion for Liam. This is the dirt they tried to use against me, Bianca said, her eyes locking with Liam's. The loss of my son. They believe it is my weakness, my shame. They are wrong. It is the bedrock on which I have rebuilt my life. It is the fire that fuels me. It is the memory of what I survived that makes me completely, utterly unbreakable. She picked up the audit binder. You did not just betray a wife, Liam. You destroyed a family. You didn't just steal from a company. You stole a future from your own child. She walked over to him, her steps measured and deliberate. He shrank back in his chair, a pathetic, broken man. She dropped the heavy binder on the table in front of him. The sound echoed like a jail door slamming shut. Your corporate crimes will be handled by the courts, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper for his ears only. But this is between you and whatever is left of your soul. You have to live with this. Every day for the rest of your life, you will remember the son you never knew. That will be your prison. Without another word, she turned her back on him and faced the stunned, silent board. The confrontation was over. She had not only exposed his crimes, she had stripped him of his humanity, leaving him with nothing but the ashes of his guilt. She had taken their ugliest weapon and turned it into her coronation. The aftermath was swift. With the confrontation having been so absolute, there was no defense for Liam and Sarah. They were promptly arrested, and their sensational trial for fraud and embezzlement became a public spectacle. Convicted and disgraced, their downfall was absolute. Liam, haunted by the spectre of his unborn son, was left a hollow man already serving a life sentence in a prison of his own making. In the ensuing turmoil at Innovatech Solutions, Bianca was a pillar of strength. Shunning celebration, she focused only on the work to be done. She called an all-hands meeting, facing a workforce fearful and uncertain about the future of the scandal-scarred company. Standing before them not as a conqueror, but as a leader, she addressed the betrayal head-on. That era of greed and lies is over, she declared, her voice calm but firm. She outlined a new vision built on a foundation of integrity, transparency, and relentless innovation. She announced profit-sharing initiatives and better benefits, committing to a culture that valued its employees above all. "I know what it feels like to have your trust broken," she said, her sincerity palpable. "This company's greatest asset is not its market share. It is you." As she spoke, the fear in the room melted away, replaced by a growing sense of hope. When she finished a single person, Marcus Thorne began to clap. He was joined by another, and then the entire auditorium erupted in a thunderous, heartfelt ovation, a vote of confidence for their new leader. Bianca stood on the stage, a faint, genuine smile on her face, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt a sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were finally quiet. She had not just reclaimed what was stolen, she had transformed it. Her revenge was not the destruction of her enemies, but the creation of her own new and brilliant legacy. So ends the incredible saga of Bianca Hayes, a story that proves the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest souls. She was pushed from the highest tower of love and trust, left with nothing but the ashes of a life and the secret sorrow of a lost child. But from those ashes, she didn't just rise. She rebuilt an empire and served justice not with hatred, but with undeniable success. Her story is a powerful reminder that our past does not have to be our prison. Your greatest pain can be repurposed into your greatest power, and the ultimate revenge is not sinking to their level, but building a life so magnificent they can only watch in awe. What if the most beautiful day of your life was used as a weapon to destroy you? Imagine a grand ballroom filled with 100 of the city's elite, all eyes on one man, a charismatic millionaire on the verge of a life-changing announcement. But this isn't a celebration of his success. It's the stage for a shocking betrayal. He's about to propose to his mistress in front of everyone. But he's forgotten one crucial detail. His pregnant wife is in the audience, and she's holding a secret that will turn his triumphant moment into a public spectacle of ruin. Stay with us as we unravel a story of love lies and a revenge so perfectly orchestrated it will leave you breathless. The lie was a gilded car, and Julian Thorne was both its prisoner and its architect. To the world, he was the golden boy of the tech industry, the visionary CEO of Nexus Innovations, a company that had revolutionized the way people connected. His life was a curated masterpiece of success, a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, a collection of vintage cars that would make any collector weep, and a wife who was the epitome of grace and beauty, Amelia. Amelia Thorne was more than just a pretty face on Julian's arm. She was an accomplished art curator, her gallery a sanctuary of emerging talent in a city obsessed with the established. Her intelligence was as sharp as her wit, her heart as expansive as the canvases she so adored. She was the calm to his storm, the anchor to his soaring ambition. And she was pregnant with their first child, a secret they had been cherishing, a new chapter they were about to write together in the beautiful story of their lives. Or so she thought. In the weeks leading up to the Nexus Innovations' 10th anniversary gala, Julian had been a different man. He was more attentive, more affectionate than he had been in months. He would come home early, bearing bouquets of Amelia's favorite peonies, his eyes filled with a tenderness that melted away the subtle anxieties that had begun to creep into her heart. He'd talk about the baby, his voice thick with emotion, his hand resting on her burgeoning belly, as if to protect their unborn child from the world. Amelia, ever the optimist, had allowed herself to believe that this was a new beginning, that the distance she had felt growing between them was just a product of his work stress. She had no idea that his renewed affection was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, a final act of deception before the curtain fell on their marriage. The truth was, Julian was leading a double life, a life that revolved around Isabella Rossi. Isabella was a force of nature, a fiery Italian beauty with ambition that burned as brightly as her emerald eyes. A rising star in the world of fashion, blogging her social media, was a carefully curated fantasy of glamour and luxury, a life she was determined to make her own. She had met Julian at a tech conference a year ago, and their connection had been instant electric and utterly forbidden. To Isabella, Julian was not just a married man. He was a stepping stone, a golden ticket to the life she so desperately craved. She had convinced herself that their love was real, a passionate affair that eclipsed the staid, comfortable marriage he had with Amelia. She saw Amelia as a relic of Julian's past, a woman who couldn't possibly understand the depths of his ambition, the fire in his soul. Isabella was the future, and she was tired of waiting in the wings. The plan had been hatched in the hushed intimacy of a 5-star hotel suite, a place that had become their sanctuary. It was Isabella's idea, a bold, audacious move that would leave no room for retreat. "You need to choose Julian," she had whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You can't have both. It's time to show the world who you really love. Propose to me at the gala, in front of everyone. Let them see that I am the one you choose." Julian, a man who had built an empire on calculated risks, was initially hesitant. The scandal would be enormous, the fallout unpredictable. But Isabella's words had tapped into a deep-seated insecurity. He harbored a fear of being ordinary. He had always been a man who took what he wanted, and he wanted Isabella. He wanted the thrill, the passion, the validation she offered. He had convinced himself that a clean break, however brutal, was the only way. He would be seen as a man of decisive action, a man who followed his heart no matter the cost. He would be free. So the stage was set for a public execution of his marriage. The Nexus Innovations 10th Anniversary Gala, to be held at the opulent Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, was the chosen venue. The guest list was a who's who of the global tech and finance industries. The media would be there in full force. It was the perfect platform for Julian to unveil his new life with Isabella by his side. A few days before the gala, Julian presented Amelia with a stunning diamond necklace. "A little something to celebrate us," he had said, his voice a smooth, practiced lie, "for being the most patient, loving wife a man could ask for, and for carrying our child." Amelia, her heart swelling with love, had thrown her arms around him, burying her face in his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. A scent she had always associated with home, with safety. She was completely oblivious to the fact that in a velvet box, tucked away in his safe, lay another diamond. A diamond of staggering size and brilliance, a diamond that would soon be placed on another woman's finger. The legendary Winston Blue Diamond, a gem as deep and blue as the ocean of lies he was about to drown her in. Amelia had her own surprise planned for the gala. She had spent weeks secretly compiling a video montage of their life together. It was a love letter in moving pictures, their first date, their trip to Tuscany, their wedding day. The highlight was a clip from their wedding vows. Julian's voice, thick with unshed tears, promising to love and cherish her for all eternity. She had intended to have it played as a surprise for him during her toast, a public declaration of her love and excitement for their growing family. She had no idea that her beautiful, heartfelt gift would become her weapon of choice in a war she didn't even know she was fighting. As Amelia packed for their trip to Singapore, she hummed a soft tune, her hand resting on her belly. She felt a flutter, a gentle kick from the new life growing inside her. She smiled. Everything was perfect. She was living in a gilded cage, but she was yet to see the bars. The door was about to be flung open, not to freedom, but to a devastating truth that would shatter her world into 1,000,000 pieces. The storm was gathering, and she was standing right in its eye, blissfully unaware of the destruction that was about to be unleashed. The grand ballroom of the Marina Bay Sands was a spectacle of breathtaking opulence. Crystal chandeliers like frozen waterfalls hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a galaxy of light upon the sea of guests below. The air hummed with the symphony of clinking champagne flutes, hushed conversations, and the gentle strains of a string quartet. The elite of the global tech world were all there, dressed in their finest, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of success. This was Julian Thorne's kingdom, and tonight he was its undisputed king. Amelia, radiant in a bespoke midnight blue gown that draped elegantly over her pregnant form, moved through the crowd with an easy grace. The diamond necklace Julian had given her sparkled at her throat, a cold, beautiful lie against her warm skin. She greeted friends and acquaintances, her smile genuine, her heart full of a quiet joy. She felt a surge of pride for Julian, for the empire he had built from the ground up. She was his partner in every sense of the word, his confidant, his biggest supporter. Tonight was a celebration of their shared journey, their shared success. Julian was in his element, a charismatic whirlwind of handshakes and charming smiles. He moved from one influential guest to another, his words as smooth as the vintage champagne he sipped. But beneath the polished veneer of the successful CEO, a current of nervous energy crackled. His eyes would occasionally flit towards the entrance, a flicker of anticipation, of dread in their depths. Amelia, ever attuned to his moods, noticed his restlessness. "Everything all right, my love?" she asked, her hand finding his. "You seem a little on edge." Julian turned to her, his smile a masterpiece of deception. "Just the usual pre-speech jitters," he lied, squeezing her hand. 10 years. It's a big milestone. I want everything to be perfect." He leaned in and kissed her, a brief, almost perfunctory gesture that felt more like a performance for the benefit of those watching than a genuine expression of affection. "You look breathtaking tonight, Amelia," he murmured, his eyes holding hers for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of something unreadable in their depths. It could have been guilt, or perhaps a final fleeting moment of regret. Amelia, reassured, smiled back at him. "You'll be brilliant, as always." A short while later, Isabella Rossi made her entrance. She was a vision in crimson, a stark, dramatic contrast to the cool blues and silvers that dominated the ballroom. Her dress was a daring, figure-hugging creation that announced her arrival with an unapologetic confidence. Heads turned, whispers followed in her wake. She was a woman who commanded attention, and tonight she was determined to hold it. She caught Julian's eye from across the room, a slow, predatory smile gracing her lips. It was a look of shared conspiracy of imminent victory. Amelia, her back to the entrance, as she chatted with the wife of a Japanese investor, missed the silent exchange entirely. The moment came after the main course had been cleared. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found Julian as he ascended the stage. A hush fell over the ballroom. He stood at the podium, the Nexus Innovations logo glowing on the massive screen behind him. He looked out at the sea of faces, a confident smile playing on his lips. He began his speech with a walk down memory lane, his voice resonant and captivating. He spoke of the early days of Nexus Innovations, the struggles, the breakthroughs, the relentless pursuit of a dream. He was a master storyteller, weaving a narrative of innovation and perseverance that had the audience hanging on his every word. He paid tribute to his team, his investors, his partners. It was a flawless performance, the speech of a visionary leader at the pinnacle of his success. Amelia watched him from her table at the front, her heart swelling with pride. She clutched the small USB drive in her purse, the wedding video she had so lovingly prepared. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she played it. Then Julian's tone shifted. Success, he said, his voice taking on a more personal, more intimate quality, is not just about building a company. It's about building a life. It's about finding that one person who understands you, who challenges you, who inspires you to be the best version of yourself. Amelia smiled, thinking he was about to pay tribute to her, to their marriage. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. For a long time, Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, I thought I had that. I thought I knew what happiness was. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It throws you a curveball when you least expect it, and you realize that everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you wanted, was wrong. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. This was not the typical corporate speech. Amelia's smile faltered. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of her stomach. This was not the script she had imagined. Tonight, Julian declared, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. I want to be honest. I want to be true to myself and to my heart. There is someone in this room who has changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Someone who has shown me what true passion, what true love really is. He paused, letting the suspense build. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, thick with a palpable tension. Amelia's heart was pounding in her chest, a frantic, desperate drumbeat against her ribs. She looked around, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. And then she saw her. Isabella Rossi standing near the stage, her eyes locked on Julian, her expression a mixture of triumph and anticipation. Isabella. Julian said, his voice soft, but carrying to every corner of the room. Isabella Rossi, would you please join me on stage? A collective gasp went through the crowd. Whispers erupted like wildfire. All eyes turned to Isabella as she glided towards the stage, her crimson dress a slash of defiance against the shocked silence. She took Julian's hand, her smile radiant, triumphant. Julian turned to face her, his back to the massive screen that still bore his company's logo. He ignored the shocked faces in the crowd, the frantic whispers, the dawning realization on the faces of those who knew he was a married man. He had eyes only for Isabella. Isabella, he began, his voice thick with a rehearsed emotion. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met. You are my soulmate, my everything. I know this is sudden, but I can't live another day without you by my side. I want the world to know how much I love you. And then in front of 100 horrified guests, in front of the world's media, Julian Thorne, the celebrated tech millionaire, got down on one knee. He pulled out a velvet box, and from it, he produced a ring that silenced the room. The Winston Blue Diamond. A magnificent pear-shaped gem of an impossible, mesmerizing blue caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 glittering shards. It was a king's ransom on a platinum band. "Isabella Rossi." Julian's voice boomed through the speakers. "Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic clicking of cameras. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. This was her moment, the culmination of all her plans, all her ambitions. But just as she opened her mouth to say yes, just as the word of her victory was about to be uttered, a flicker on the giant screen behind them stole the attention of every single person in the room. The Nexus Innovations logo dissolved, and in its place, a new image began to form. It was a scene of breathtaking beauty, a sun-drenched vineyard in Tuscany. And in the center of the frame, a younger, happier Julian Thorne looked into the eyes of his bride, Amelia. The wedding video began to play silent at first, a ghost of a memory flickering to life on the giant screen. The image was jarringly intimate in the vast, opulent ballroom. There was Julian, his face unguarded, his eyes shining with an adoration that was achingly real. He was looking at Amelia resplendent in a lace wedding gown, her smile a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. The scene was from their wedding day 4 years prior, a day that now felt like a lifetime ago. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Julian, still on one knee, froze. He looked up at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Isabella, her triumphant smile faltering, followed his gaze. The blood drained from her face. This was not part of the plan. Then the audio kicked in. Julian's voice, younger, more earnest, filled the silent ballroom. It was his wedding speech, a torrent of heartfelt promises and poetic declarations of love. "They say that every man dreams of a moment like this," his voice echoed. "A moment where everything falls into place, where you look at someone and you just know. You know that you've found your other half. Looking at Amelia today, I know that for the first time in my life, I am whole." On screen, the younger Julian raised his glass to Amelia. "To my wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful, brilliant, incredible wife. You are my compass, my anchor, my one true north. You are not just the love of my life. You are my life. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of your love. I promise to cherish you, to honor you, and to love you and only you for all of eternity." The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it was almost comical. The guests sat in stunned silence, their gazes shifting from the romantic spectacle on the screen to the sordid tableau on the stage. There was Julian kneeling before his mistress, the echoes of his eternal vows to his wife ringing in his ears. There was Isabella, her face a thunderous canvas of fury and humiliation. And there at her table near the front was Amelia. She rose to her feet, a vision of ethereal calm in the eye of the storm. The midnight blue of her gown seemed to absorb the chaos around her, her posture regale her expression, unreadable. She was no longer a victim. She was a queen about to reclaim her throne. Every eye in the room was now on her as she began to walk towards the stage. Her steps slow, deliberate, and utterly fearless. The gentle swell of her pregnancy was now unmistakable, a silent, powerful testament to the depth of Julian's betrayal. As she reached the stage, a technician acting on a prearranged signal handed her a microphone. She didn't look at Julian, not yet. She addressed the crowd, her voice as clear and as cold as ice. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady, devoid of any tremor. "I apologize for the interruption. My husband, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give, he decided one wife simply wasn't enough." A wave of shocked laughter quickly stifled went through the room. Julian scrambled to his feet, his face ashen. "Amelia," he stammered, reaching for her. "What are you doing?" Amelia finally turned her gaze upon him, and for the first time that night, Julian saw his wife. Not the gentle, forgiving Amelia he had taken for granted, but a woman of formidable strength, her eyes blazing with a cold, righteous fury. "What am I doing?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "I'm simply providing a little context, Julian. A little trip down memory lane. I thought your new fiancé," she spat the word like a curse, her eyes flicking to Isabella, "might appreciate knowing the kind of promises you're capable of making. And breaking." She then turned her attention to Isabella, who stood frozen, the magnificent Winston blue diamond on her finger, now feeling like a shackle. "Isabella, isn't it?" Amelia said, her voice dripping with a polite, venomous sweetness. "That's a beautiful ring. The Winston blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse." Isabella, for the first time, found her voice. "You have no right," she began, her voice shrill with indignation. "No right." Amelia cut her off, taking a step closer. "I am his wife. I am the mother of his unborn child." She let that revelation hang in the air, a bombshell that sent another shockwave through the room. "I have every right. You, on the other hand, are a footnote in a story that is about to come to a very abrupt end." Amelia turned back to Julian, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Julian? Did you think I was that naive, that blind, while you were whispering sweet nothings in her ear? I was at home, feeling our baby kick for the first time. While you were buying her diamonds, I was decorating a nursery. You weren't just cheating on me, Julian. You were cheating on our family. You were cheating on the future you promised us." She paused, taking a deep breath, her composure absolute. "This grand romantic gesture," she said, gesturing to the pathetic scene on the stage. "It's not about love. It's about your ego, your insatiable need for more. More money, more success, more adoration. You didn't fall in love with her, Julian. You fell in love with a younger, more flattering reflection of yourself." Then she delivered the final devastating blow. "And you know what the saddest part is? You've not only destroyed our marriage, our family, you've just destroyed the very empire you're so proud of." Julian stared at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He thought this was just about his infidelity, a messy, public divorce. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. He had no idea that his wife, the quiet, unassuming art curator, was about to bring his entire world crashing down around him. He had underestimated her. And in the world of high-stakes business and brutal betrayals, underestimating your opponent was a fatal mistake. A cavernous silence descended upon the grand ballroom, a void so absolute it seemed to swallow the music, the whispers, and the very air itself. On the massive screen, the image of a beaming Amelia in her wedding dress faded, replaced by the stark, glowing logo of Nexus Innovations, a silent monument to the lie that had just been exposed. Julian remained on one knee, frozen in a grotesque parody of a romantic proposal. The Winston blue diamond on Isabella's finger, which moments ago had been a symbol of triumphant new love, now felt like a shard of ice, a cold, heavy weight of impending doom. Julian's mind, usually a fortress of strategic calculation, was a maelstrom of chaos. This can't be happening. The thought ricocheted through his skull. It's a prank, a sick, twisted joke. He scrambled to his feet, a jerky, uncoordinated movement that betrayed his panic. He forced a laugh, a harsh, grating sound that echoed unnaturally in the stillness. "Well," he said, his voice straining for a lightness it could not find. "It seems my wife has a flair for the dramatic. A little trip down memory lane, it seems. Very sentimental." He turned to the audience, his smile a desperate cracking veneer. "But as I was saying, tonight is about the future." His words trailed off into nothingness. No one was listening. Every single eye in that room, from the powerful venture capitalists at the front tables to the service staff lingering by the walls, was fixed on the woman walking toward the stage. Amelia moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a tidal wave, gathering its strength before it crashes ashore. She was no longer the heartbroken wife. She was an avenging angel, her face a mask of serene, chilling composure. The microphone was in her hand, and as she stepped into the spotlight, she seemed to draw all the light in the room, leaving Julian and Isabella in a sudden, cold shadow. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice, amplified by the speakers, was calm and clear, yet it cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "I do apologize for the interruption. My husband, Julian Thorne, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. "He decided one wife simply wasn't enough." A few shocked gasps, followed by a ripple of nervous, incredulous laughter, broke the tension. Julian's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. This was not a sentimental prank. This was a declaration of war. "Amelia, stop this," he hissed, taking a step towards her. "You're making a scene. We can discuss this at home." "Home?" Amelia's laugh was a soft, brittle sound, devoid of all warmth. "You mean the house I built? The bed we shared, the nursery I decorated for our child?" "Which home are you referring to, Julian? Because it seems to me you've made your new home in hotel suites and whispered lies." She turned her gaze on Isabella, who stood frozen, her mind racing. "This is a disaster." He promised he had handled her. He promised she was weak. Isabella's instinct was to fight back, to assert her claim. "You have no right to be up here," she snapped, her voice higher and shriller than she intended. "This is our moment." "Your moment." Amelia's eyes, cold and assessing, raked over Isabella from head to toe. "Your moment of what, exactly? Of triumph, of stealing another woman's husband? Let me tell you what this moment is. It's a lesson in the true cost of things." She gestured to the magnificent diamond on Isabella's hand. "That is the Winston blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse. And darling." Amelia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was nonetheless audible to the front rows. "Looking at you now, I'd say you're thoroughly cursed." Then she turned from the personal to the professional, her focus shifting to the audience, specifically to the tables where the most powerful investors were seated. Her entire demeanor changed. The wronged wife receded, and a formidable new persona emerged, the savvy, aggrieved business partner. Many of you in this room are investors in Nexus Innovations. She began, her tone now crisp and authoritative. You invested your capital and your trust in a company you believed to be stable, led by a man you believed to be a visionary. But I ask you, how can you trust a man with your millions when he cannot even honor the most sacred personal contract of his life? This struck a chord. Phones previously held up to record the drama were now being used for a different purpose. Thumbs flew across screens as investors sent frantic, coded messages to their teams. The narrative had shifted from a salacious affair to a question of leadership, of stability, of risk. Julian likes to tell the story. Amelia continued, pacing the stage slowly, of how he started Nexus Innovations in a dusty garage with nothing but a dream and a few $1,000s of his own money. It's a fantastic story. It's the myth of the self-made man, the narrative upon which his entire public persona is built. It's a powerful story. She stopped and looked directly at Julian. And it is a complete and utter lie. Julian's blood ran cold. No, she wouldn't. He had buried that truth so deep, had rewritten history so effectively, that even he barely remembered it. The truth, Amelia announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, is that Nexus Innovations was born not in a garage, but in a lawyer's office. It was funded not by a few $1,000s, but by $50 million of seed capital. Money that did not come from a venture capitalist or a bank loan that recognized Julian's supposed genius. It came from a single source, my family's trust. The ballroom erupted. The low murmur exploded into a roar of conversation. Julian felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. This was a catastrophic blow, striking at the very heart of his carefully constructed legacy. He was not the self-made titan he claimed to be. He was a man who had been bankrolled by his wife's family. And my grandfather, Amelia's voice sliced through the noise, silencing the room once more, was a man who had seen his share of charlatans and opportunists. He believed in Julian's idea, but he was a shrewd judge of character. He saw the ambition, but he also saw the recklessness. So he insisted on a small, simple clause in the investment agreement. A safeguard. He called it his integrity clause. A morality clause. Julian stared at her, his mind a blank wall of white noise. Morality clause. The words barely registered. It was a faint, dusty memory, a piece of legal jargon he had dismissed as the ramblings of an old man, irrelevant in the face of his inevitable success. The clause is very specific, Amelia explained, as if lecturing a class. It states that in the event of a gross breach of personal and professional trust, an act of such profound betrayal and public infidelity that it brings shame upon our family name and by extension jeopardizes the ethical standing of the company, his money founded the controlling interest in the shares, purchased with that $50 million, automatically reverts to me. If the previous revelation had been a bombshell, this was a nuclear detonation. The implications were staggering. At the company's current valuation, that initial investment now represented a 40% stake in Nexus Innovations, not a minority share, a controlling interest. You're lying. Julian finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled cry. That's not legal. It wouldn't hold up. Oh, it's perfectly legal, Mr. Thorne, and it will hold up in any court in the world. The new voice was deep resonant and commanded immediate respect. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as a distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit made his way to the stage. It was Mr. David Chen, a titan of Asian finance, a man whose reputation for integrity was as legendary as his fortune. He was, as Julian knew, with a sinking feeling of absolute dread, the executor of Amelia's family estate. Mr. Chen ascended the stage and stood beside Amelia, placing a protective paternal hand on her shoulder. He looked at Julian, not with anger, but with a profound and heavy disappointment. "I was your father-in-law's closest friend and his personal attorney for 30 years. Mr. Chen said, his voice a low rumble of authority. "I personally drafted that clause. I advised him that while Julian was brilliant, his character was a high-risk investment. The clause was non-negotiable." He turned to the audience. "And as the executor of the estate, I have already filed the necessary paperwork with our legal teams. As of this moment, Miss Amelia Thorne is the majority shareholder and the controlling power of Nexus Innovations." The house of cards did not just collapse. It was annihilated. Julian stumbled backwards, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been physically shot. He had lost his company. In the span of 10 minutes on the night that was meant to be his crowning glory, he had lost everything. He spun around his mind, searching for a target, for someone to blame other than himself. His wild eyes landed on Isabella. She was trying to back away, to melt into the shadows, her face a mask of pure terror. Her own scheme was unraveling, her dreams of wealth and power turning to ash. "Not so fast, Ms. Rossi." Mr. Chen's voice was like a whip crack. He held up a tablet, its screen glowing. "It seems Mr. Thorne's catastrophic lack of judgment was not limited to his marriage." He addressed Julian directly. "For the past 6 months, Nexus has been bleeding sensitive data, product roadmaps, R&D on our next-gen processors, confidential financial projections. We knew we had a mole, but we couldn't find the source. We suspected a high-level breach." He paused. "We were wrong. The breach wasn't high-level. It was intimate." He turned the tablet to face Julian. On the screen was a decrypted communication log, a series of damning emails and texts between the account Bella Rossi and a senior executive at Aperture Dynamics Nexus Innovations' most ruthless competitor. It was a meticulous record of corporate espionage. Isabella had been seducing him for secrets, playing the part of the love-struck mistress, while systematically gutting his company from the inside. Julian stared at the screen, then at Isabella. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it was almost surreal. He had been a pawn in 2 different games and had lost them both. All the humiliation, all the rage, all the terror he felt coalesced into a single explosive point. "You!" he snarled, lunging towards her. "You did this!" 2 large security guards materializing as if from nowhere at Mr. Chen's subtle signal intercepted him, holding him back. Isabella shrieked, cowering away from him. "I did what you wanted!" she screamed back, her facade of sophistication shattering completely. "You wanted to be free. You wanted to be with me. I wanted a partner, not a viper who would sell me out to the highest bidder." Julian roared, struggling against the guard's iron grip. The scene had descended into sheer pandemonium. Paparazzi who had been held at the perimeter broke through the lines, their flashes exploding like a volley of gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, one of Mr. Chen's assistants, a stern-faced woman, walked calmly up to the sobbing Isabella. "I believe this belongs to Mr. Chen's client," she said coolly, and with practiced efficiency, she slid the Winston blue diamond from Isabella's finger. The cursed diamond was dropped unceremoniously into a simple evidence bag. That final act seemed to break something in Julian. The fight went out of him. His body went limp, and he sagged against the guards holding him up. His gaze was vacant, his face a hollow mask of utter devastation. He looked out at the sea of faces of former friends, colleagues, and investors, and saw nothing but contempt, pity, and the morbid fascination of strangers watching a spectacular car crash. He was no longer Julian Thorne, the tech visionary. He was a joke, a failure, a man who had built a glittering empire on a foundation of lies, only to see it all brought down by the two women he thought he could control. As the flashbulbs continued to pop, searing the image of his ruin onto the world's collective memory, he finally understood. This wasn't just the end of his career. It was the end of his life as he knew it. He stood on the brightly lit stage of his own, making a fallen king in a kingdom of rubble. Of course, here is a rewritten, significantly longer and more detailed version of Part 5, delving deeper into the aftermath and the characters' new realities. The sun that rose over Singapore the next morning seemed to Julian like a hostile, interrogating eye. He was huddled in the cavernous living room of his penthouse suite, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of a world that no longer felt like his. The silence of the suite was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering him, punctuated only by the incessant, angry buzzing of his phone on the marble coffee table. He hadn't slept. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of cameras. The cold disappointment in Mr. Chen's eyes, the triumphant, chilling calm on Amelia's face. His world had been reduced to the glowing screen of a tablet in his trembling hands. The headlines screamed at him from every major news outlet on the planet. The Thorne Betrayal, CEO loses billion-dollar empire in shocking gala proposal. Nexus in freefall. Wife seizes control after morality clause triggered the CEO and the spy. How a scorned wife uncovered a multi-billion-dollar espionage plot. Social media was a raging inferno. The hashtag #GeilerOffLies was trending globally. Memes of his devastated face were already viral. He was no longer a person. He was a spectacle, a cautionary tale for the ages his downfall consumed as entertainment by millions. He finally picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Amelia's name. He had called 37 times. He had sent 22 rambling, incoherent texts, a digital tapestry of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas, all unanswered. The silence from her was more damning than any angry reply could ever be. Miles away in a serene, minimalist suite overlooking the gardens by the bay, Amelia was the picture of tranquility. She sat opposite Mr. Chen at a large mahogany table, sipping chamomile tea. Her phone was off. Spread before them were not tabloids, but corporate financial statements, legal documents, and a draft of a press release. There was no celebration, no gloating. There was only work to be done. The board is convening an emergency session via video conference at 0900. Mr. Chen said, his voice calm and steady. The motion to remove Julian as CEO and chairman is a formality at this point. They're terrified. The stock is projected to lose 60% of its value at opening bell. We need to halt trading, Amelia said, her voice clear and decisive. She had already shed the skin of the artist and donned the armor of a leader. We can't let panic dictate our value. We need to issue a statement immediately, one that reassures our employees and our real investors that Nexus is not Julian Thorne. It's bigger than him. Its future is secure. And what is that future, Amelia? Mr. Chen asked, watching her carefully. Amelia looked out the window, her hand resting protectively on her belly. My grandfather invested in an idea, David, an idea about connecting people. Julian turned that into a machine for accumulating wealth and power. He became obsessed with growth, with winning, and he lost sight of the why. The future of Nexus is in rediscovering that why. Technology with a conscience, innovation with integrity. That will be our story. Mr. Chen smiled a rare, genuine expression of pride. The old man would have been so proud of his granddaughter. She had not only inherited his fortune, she had inherited his wisdom. The weeks that followed were a brutal lesson in consequence for Julian. The emergency board meeting was a swift, bloodless execution. He appeared via a video link, a disheveled, hollowed-out version of himself, and listened in sullency as the people who had once hung on his every word voted unanimously to sever all ties with him. He was stripped of his titles, his stock options, his severance package. The company he had considered an extension of himself had surgically amputated him. His financial ruin was just as swift. Lawsuits from shareholders piled up, and his personal assets were frozen pending the litigation. The sprawling penthouse, the collection of vintage cars, the private jet, they were all just assets to be liquidated bargaining chips in a game he had already lost. Friends who had once clamored for his attention now crossed the street to avoid him. He was radioactive. Isabella Rossi's downfall was even more public and pathetic. The images of her being led from her chic apartment in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears, were a stark counterpoint to the glamorous photos she had so carefully curated. Her bail was set at an impossibly high figure, and Aperture Dynamics, the company she had betrayed Nexus for, immediately disavowed any knowledge of her actions, leaving her to face the wolves alone. At her first hearing, her lawyer argued she was a pawn, a woman blinded by love. But the prosecution laid out the evidence of encrypted financial transactions and damning communications, painting a picture not of a lovelorn fool, but of a calculating and greedy operative. Her fantasy had ended in a beige-colored courtroom, her future to be decided by strangers. While their worlds imploded, Amelia's was expanding. She returned from Singapore and walked into the glass and steel headquarters of Nexus Innovations, not as the CEO's wife, but as its leader. A palpable tension hung in the air as she addressed the entire company in the main atrium. Employees who had known her only as a pretty face at holiday parties now looked at her with a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. I know there is a lot of uncertainty right now. She began, her voice steady and sure, needing no podium or notes. You read the headlines, you saw the drama, and you are right to be concerned. But I am not here to talk about the past. I am here to talk about our future. She laid out her vision with a passion and clarity that captivated the room. She spoke not of market caps and quarterly earnings, but of purpose, of building products that helped people, of creating a workplace culture free from the toxic, high-pressure ego that had defined Julian's reign. For too long, she concluded, this company has been a reflection of one man's ambition. From today, it will be a reflection of our collective integrity. She didn't receive a standing ovation. The shock was still too raw for that. But she earned something far more valuable, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of respect. The ensuing months were a period of quiet, intense transformation. Amelia, with Mr. Chen as her mentor, proved to be a natural leader. She was decisive, empathetic, and had an artist's eye for talent and potential where others saw only data points. She dismantled the boys' club culture, promoting talented women to leadership positions and fostering an enthronement of genuine collaboration. Nexus began to stabilize, then to heal. She sold the monstrous penthouse and bought a charming, light-filled house in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, a world away from the cold glamour of her former life. She turned one of the rooms into a nursery painting murals of gentle animals and starry skies on the walls. In this sanctuary, she prepared for motherhood, finding a deep, quiet joy that had been absent from her life for so long. She was building a new life, a new company, and a new family, all on her own terms. Julian, meanwhile, existed in a self-imposed exile. The lawsuits were eventually settled, leaving him with a fraction of his former wealth, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever reclaim his place in the pantheon of the ultra-rich. He lived alone in a sterile modern apartment, his days unstructured and empty. He read philosophy, he took long, aimless walks. He sat for hours, staring at the city that had once been his kingdom. For the first time in his life, with all the distractions stripped away, he was forced to confront the man in the mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. He saw the insecurity that had driven his ambition, the ego that had fueled his betrayal, the hollowness at the core of his being. A week before Amelia's due date, he sent her a single handwritten letter. It contained no excuses, no justifications. It was just a simple, humble request to see her one last time, to say what he needed to say in person. After 2 days of deliberation, she agreed. They met in a public park, a neutral ground beneath the gentle shade of old oak trees. Julian was already there, sitting on a bench, looking shockingly ordinary. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple trousers and a sweater. The predatory confidence had been replaced by a quiet, weary sadness. Amelia approached her steps, slow and steady, her large, round belly leading the way. She didn't sit down. "Julian," she said, her voice soft without malice. He stood up, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. "Amelia, thank you for coming. You look beautiful, healthy." "I am," she replied simply. "I know I'm sorry isn't enough." He began, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I've said it to myself 1,000 times. What I did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a failure of character, a failure of love. I was so terrified of being ordinary, of being second best, that I built this persona, this Julian Thorne, the visionary, and I started to believe it myself. I thought I needed more, something new and exciting, to prove to the world and to myself that I was extraordinary." He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a profound, soul-deep regret. "And the whole time, the most extraordinary thing in my life was right in front of me. You, our life, our son. I had everything, and I burned it all to the ground for the sake of my own vanity. I didn't just betray you, Amelia. I betrayed myself. I destroyed the best man I ever was, the man you married." Amelia listened in silence, her expression unreadable. She had expected excuses, perhaps even a final attempt at manipulation. She had not expected this raw, painful honesty. "I know there's no going back," he continued, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to be a father. But I had to tell you this. I had to let you know that I see it. I finally see it all." A long silence hung between them, filled only by the rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children. "I'm glad you see it, Julian," Amelia said at last, her voice gentle but firm. "Not for my sake, but for yours. You have a long road ahead of you to figure out who you are without the money and the power." She took a breath. "Our son will be born next week. His name will be Theo, after my grandfather. He will know who his father is. I will show him pictures, I will tell him stories of the good times. I will not raise him on a foundation of anger. She took a step closer, her hand resting on her belly. But he will also know the truth, not the sordid details, but the essential lesson. He will learn that integrity is the only currency that truly matters. He will learn that true strength is about kindness, not cruelty. And he will learn that a man's worth is measured by the promises he keeps. That will be your legacy to him, Julian. A lesson. She looked at him one last time, a flicker of the love that once was now transformed into a sad, distant compassion. I forgive you, Julian. I have to, for my own peace and for Theo's. But forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. Our story is over. With that, she turned and walked away, not looking back. She walked towards her future, towards her new life, towards the waiting arms of motherhood. Julian stood frozen watching her go until she was out of sight. He was alone, but for the first time he felt a flicker not of despair, but of something else. The devastating, painful and necessary beginning of penance. The ashes of his old life were behind him, and before him a vast empty landscape where perhaps something new and honest could finally begin to grow. And there you have it, a story that proves that hell hath no fury. Like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is smart, resourceful, and about to become the majority shareholder of her husband's company. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about avoiding heartbreak, but about how we rise from the ashes. It's a story of empowerment, of taking control of your own narrative, and of serving revenge, not hot, not cold, but with a controlling interest and a killer business plan. What did you think of Amelia's epic takedown? Was Julian's downfall deserved? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.